The morning briefing on Europa Station felt different today. Ambassador Thomas Walsh had received the same reports every day for the past 6 months. But something in the tone of the Galactic Federation's latest demands made his stomach turn. The Draknari Empire wanted Earth's quantum computing secrets, and they weren't asking nicely anymore. Walsh walked through the corridors of humanity's most important diplomatic outpost, passing the usual mix of alien species that made up the Federation's bureaucracy. Tall, scaled Draknari warriors strode past with their characteristic arrogance. The insectoid Vorthak clicked and buzzed in their mechanical way as they managed the station's computer systems. Dozens of other species went about their daily business, all of them looking down on the humans as the galaxy's youngest and weakest members. That was exactly what humanity wanted them to think. 200 years ago, when Earth first made contact with galactic civilization, the decision had been made at the highest levels of government. Humanity would play weak. They would appear grateful, humble, and slightly backward. They would share just enough technology to seem useful, but never enough to seem threatening. And while they played this role, they would prepare for the day when the act would no longer be necessary. Walsh entered his private office and activated the secure communication system. The holographic display showed President Maria Santos in her office on Earth. But Walsh knew she was actually speaking from the command center buried 3 kilometers beneath the Sahara Desert. The Draknari Fleet Admiral sent another message, Walsh reported. They're giving us 72 hours to comply with their technology demands. After that, they're threatening military action against our outer colonies. Santos nodded grimly. How many ships are they sending? 3 full battle fleets. Intelligence estimates about 800 capital ships total plus support vessels. Walsh paused. Tom, they think we only have about 50 ships capable of defending ourselves. Let them think that, Santos replied. Admiral Torres, are you monitoring this conversation? Another figure appeared in the hologram. Admiral Carmen Torres had spent her entire career preparing for this moment. All ghost fleets report ready, Madam President. We have been tracking the Draknari movements for weeks. Their formations are exactly as our tactical computers predicted. Walsh felt a familiar thrill at hearing those words. Ghost fleets. For 2 centuries, while Earth's official navy consisted of a few dozen aging cruisers and some patrol boats, humanity had been building something else entirely. Hidden shipyards in the asteroid belt, mining operations on rogue planets floating in interstellar space, construction facilities inside hollowed-out moons and behind carefully placed holographic screens. The Vorthak are monitoring our communications, Torres continued. They believe they know everything about our military capabilities. What they don't know is that we've been feeding them false information for decades. Every sensor reading, every intelligence report, every casual conversation has been carefully planned to maintain the illusion. Santos turned her attention back to Walsh. Tom, I need you to request an emergency session with the Federation Council. Tell them humanity is prepared to negotiate, but we need time to consider the Draknari demands. How much time should I ask for? Walsh asked, though he already suspected the answer. 72 hours should be perfect. Walsh smiled despite himself. In 72 hours, the Draknari fleets would be deep in human space, approaching what they believed were defenseless colonies. They would be spread out across multiple systems, confident in their superiority, completely unprepared for what was about to happen. As the communication ended, Walsh began composing his message to the Federation Council. He would play his role perfectly, appearing worried and desperate as he begged for more time to consider humanity's response to the Draknari ultimatum. He would speak of Earth's peaceful nature, their desire to find a diplomatic solution, their hope that reasonable beings could work together. What he wouldn't mention was the massive fleet of human warships that had been moving into position for the past month. Ships that incorporated technology the Federation had never seen, weapon systems that had been tested in secret for decades, defense networks that could turn any solar system into an impregnable fortress. Meanwhile, across human space, ordinary citizens went about their daily lives with no idea that everything was about to change. On Mars, Terraforming engineers continued their work of building humanity's second home. On the colony worlds, farmers and miners and teachers lived their lives much as their ancestors had on Earth. The only difference was that every human settlement, no matter how small, was defended by automated systems that could hold off a fleet of warships until help arrived. The Draknari had made a critical error. They assumed that because humans appeared weak, they actually were weak. They had confused a careful strategy with genuine helplessness. In their arrogance, they had never considered that a species might deliberately hide its true capabilities. Deep in the Kuiper Belt, thousands of human warships received their final orders. Crews that had trained in secret for their entire careers powered up weapons systems that had never been used in actual combat. Captains who had spent decades studying Federation military tactics prepared to put their knowledge to the test. The deception was about to end. For 200 years, humanity had watched and learned and planned. They had studied every Federation species, mapped their territories, understood their strengths and weaknesses. They had built their military not just to defend human worlds, but to dominate any enemy foolish enough to threaten them. The Draknari thought they were about to conquer a helpless species. Instead, they were flying into the carefully prepared trap of the most dangerous predators the galaxy had ever seen. They just didn't know it yet. In less than 3 days, the balance of power in the galaxy would shift forever. The age of human weakness was ending. The age of human dominance was about to begin. The warning sirens aboard the Draknari flagship Crimson Talon had been wailing for 3 minutes straight, and Fleet Admiral Korath still couldn't believe what his sensors were telling him. Where empty space had existed just moments before, his tactical display now showed hundreds of massive heat signatures materializing across 17 different star systems. Korath paced the command deck of his flagship, his scaled hide glistening with nervous sweat. The Third Assault Fleet had been approaching the human colony of New Geneva, expecting to find perhaps a handful of defensive platforms and maybe a few outdated patrol ships. Instead, his sensors were detecting what appeared to be an entire battle fleet dropping some kind of advanced cloaking technology. "Status report," Korath roared at his tactical officer. "Sir, I'm reading 237 capital ships, class unknown. Energy signatures are off the charts. These vessels are larger than anything in our database." The young officer's voice cracked with uncertainty. "Sir, how is this possible?" Korath didn't have an answer. In 5 decades of military service, he had conquered 12 different species for the Draknari Empire. Humans were supposed to be easy prey, barely worthy of a single fleet, let alone the 3 that had been dispatched for this operation. The intelligence reports had been clear. Humanity possessed minimal military capability and would surrender after the first show of force. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out on dozens of other Draknari and Federation ships. Forthak Collective's automated monitoring stations had gone completely silent as massive human strike groups swept through their territories. Trading outposts found themselves suddenly surrounded by sleek warships that had appeared from nowhere. On the bridge of the UES Defiance, Admiral Carmen Torres watched the tactical displays with grim satisfaction. Operation Revelation was proceeding exactly as planned. 17 sectors simultaneously, 12,000 warships dropping their cloaking systems at precisely the same moment. The coordination alone should have been impossible, but humanity had spent 2 centuries perfecting their communications networks and tactical doctrine. "Admiral, we're receiving surrender requests from 6 different Federation merchant fleets," reported her communications officer. "They're asking for safe passage out of the combat zone." "Grant it," Torres replied immediately. "Our quarrel isn't with traitors and civilians. Make sure they understand they're free to leave, but they need to spread the word about what they've seen here." That was part of the plan too. Witnesses were essential. The galaxy needed to understand that humanity's hidden strength wasn't just about military force, but about the kind of civilization they represented. Unlike the Draknari, humans didn't massacre innocents. Unlike the Vorthak, they didn't see other species as resources to be harvested. On Earth, President Santos stood in the newly revealed Strategic Command Center, watching reports flood in from across human space. The center had been built in absolute secrecy, its existence known only to a few hundred people. Even now, most of humanity had no idea their species possessed the largest military force in galactic history. "Madam President," called out General Harrison from his position at the main tactical display, "the Draknari are attempting to regroup. Their scattered fleets are trying to form up at their stronghold in the Rigel system." "Expected," Santos replied. "What about the Vorthak response?" "They're activating their artificial intelligence defense grid. Every automated fortress from here to the galactic core is coming online." Santos smiled. Both reactions were exactly what the Human Strategic Planning Committee had predicted. For 200 years, while pretending to be simple farmers and merchants, humanity's best minds had been studying Federation military doctrine. They knew the Draknari preferred direct confrontation and predictable tactics. They understood the Vorthak reliance on artificial intelligence and automated systems. Most importantly, they had prepared countermeasures for both. "Signal Admiral Kumar," Santos ordered. "He's authorized to implement Plan Checkmate." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of meeting the Draknari fleets head-on in a traditional battle, human forces would bypass their military concentrations entirely and strike at the industrial infrastructure that supported their war machine. Without fuel, ammunition, and replacement parts, even the most powerful fleet became nothing more than expensive scrap metal. Drifting in space. Against the Vorthak, humanity would deploy weapons they had kept hidden for decades: electromagnetic pulse generators capable of disabling artificial intelligence systems across entire star systems. The Vorthak had grown so dependent on their automated defenses that they had forgotten how to fight without them. Throughout Federation space, the impossible was becoming reality. Species that had dominated the galaxy for millennia found themselves outmaneuvered by humans they had dismissed as primitive newcomers. Ancient trade routes were suddenly controlled by human patrol craft. Communication networks that had operated without interruption for centuries were being monitored and regulated by human signals intelligence. The smaller Federation members responded, with a mixture of terror and desperate attempts at negotiation. The Altarian Republic immediately sent diplomatic messages requesting terms for surrender. The merchant cartels of the Centauri cluster began offering tribute payments in exchange for safe passage through what was now clearly human-controlled space. But the most shocking development came from an unexpected source. Deep in Federation territory, species that had suffered under Draknari oppression for generations began sending covert messages to human commanders. They weren't asking for mercy. They were asking for liberation. Admiral Torres received the first such message while her fleet was establishing control over a major shipping lane. The transmission came from a Talani colony world that had been strip-mined by Draknari corporations for the past century. "Human fleet, this is Governor Veltar of the Talani Colonial Administration. Our people have watched your actions with great interest. If your intentions are truly different from previous conquerors, we formally request protection under human authority. We offer complete cooperation and resource sharing in exchange for freedom from Draknari exploitation." Similar messages began arriving from dozens of worlds. Species that had never been able to resist Federation oppression suddenly saw an opportunity for something better. The galaxy's power structure wasn't just shifting, it was completely transforming. Within 72 hours, the myth of human weakness had been shattered forever. But more than that, the galaxy was beginning to understand that humanity offered something the Federation never had: the possibility of a civilization based on mutual cooperation rather than domination and fear. The refugee camp on Altair 7 had swollen to 3 times its original size in just 1 week. Families from a dozen different Federation worlds had fled their homes as the news spread. Humanity was no longer hiding. Commander Lisa Park walked through the temporary shelters, observing the mixture of fear and hope in the faces around her. Unlike the sterile military briefings she was used to, this was raw reality. Draknari civilians huddled together, their proud warrior culture shattered by the speed of humanity's revelation. Vorthak technical specialists sat in small groups, their cybernetic implants flickering as they tried to process how their supposedly perfect artificial intelligence systems had been so easily defeated. Dozens of other species that had never expected to see the galaxy's power structure change, were struggling to understand what came next. Park stopped beside a medical station where human doctors were treating wounded refugees. A young Talani child was crying as a human medic carefully bandaged her injured arm. The child's mother spoke in broken Standard Galactic, trying to thank the doctor for helping someone from a species that had been humanity's enemy just days ago. This was the difference, Park realized. The Federation had always ruled through fear and intimidation. When they conquered a world, civilians died by the millions. When humanity revealed its strength, the first priority had been establishing refugee camps and medical stations for displaced populations. Her communication device chirped with an incoming message from Fleet Command. Admiral Rodriguez's face appeared on the small screen, looking tired but satisfied. "Lisa, how are things on the ground?" Rodriguez asked. "Complex," Park replied honestly. "We have about 50,000 refugees now, representing 23 different species. Most of them are convinced we're going to start mass executions any day now." Rodriguez nodded grimly. "That's what they expect based on how the Federation has always operated. What's the supply situation?" "Actually better than expected. The human colonies in this sector have been incredibly generous with food, medical supplies, and temporary housing materials. Apparently the secret's out about our real industrial capacity." That was an understatement. As humanity's hidden military revealed itself, so had their true economic power. Colonies that had appeared to be simple farming communities were actually sophisticated manufacturing centers. Mining operations that had seemed barely profitable were producing advanced materials in quantities that rivaled entire Federation sectors. The numbers were staggering even to the humans who had helped create them. Over 15,000 capital ships, 50,000 support vessels, orbital defense platforms that could protect every human world from invasion, industrial facilities that could replace battle damage faster than most enemies could inflict it. But more impressive than the raw numbers was the strategic planning behind them. Every human ship was exactly where it needed to be. Supply lines had been prepared decades in advance. Communication networks allowed coordination across thousands of light years in real time. "Admiral," Park said, "the Draknari refugees are asking about the battle at Rigel. Is it true that we took their main stronghold without firing a shot?" Rodriguez smiled. Admiral Kumar's operation was a masterpiece. Instead of attacking Rigel directly, he hit the 3 industrial worlds that supplied their fleet base. No fuel, no ammunition, no replacement parts. The Draknari admiral surrendered, his entire force rather than watch his crews starve in space. This was the pattern throughout human space. While Federation military doctrine focused on glorious battles and decisive confrontations, humanity had studied warfare as a science. Every engagement was planned with multiple objectives: military victory, minimal casualties, and maximum psychological impact. Against the Vorthak collective, the results had been even more dramatic. Their automated defense systems had been specifically designed to counter known Federation weapons and tactics. They had never considered the possibility of electromagnetic pulse weapons that could disable their artificial intelligence networks across entire star systems. With their AI assistants offline, Vorthak commanders found themselves fighting wars they had no training for. Decisions that had been made by computers for generations suddenly required organic thought processes that had grown weak from disuse. Entire fleets surrendered simply because their commanders couldn't figure out how to coordinate basic maneuvers without artificial intelligence support. Park. Quota's thoughts were interrupted by a commotion near the main gate of the refugee camp. Delegation of Altarian officials had arrived, and they were requesting a meeting with human authorities. The Altarian Republic had been one of the first Federation members to formally request human protection, and their cooperation had been invaluable in establishing stability in the region. The lead Altarian diplomat approached Park with the characteristic grace of his species. "Commander Park, my government has received communications from 17 other worlds requesting similar arrangements to ours. They wish to know if humanity is prepared to accept additional alliance partners." Park activated her communication device. "Admiral Rodriguez, are you getting this?" "I am," Rodriguez replied. Tell the Altarians that President Santos has authorized expansion of our alliance network, but each world will need to meet with our diplomatic teams to work out specific arrangements. This, too, was part of humanity's long-term strategy. Rather than ruling conquered territories through military occupation, they were building a network of voluntary alliances based on mutual benefit. Species that joined the human sphere of influence retained their autonomy and cultural identity, but gained access to human technology, medical knowledge, and military protection. The contrast with Federation methods couldn't have been more stark. When the Draknari conquered a world, they enslaved the population and stripped the planet of resources. When the Vorthak absorbed a species, they forced cybernetic integration and cultural assimilation. When humans offered protection, they left existing governments in place and asked only for cooperation and honesty. Over the following days, Park watched as the refugee camp gradually transformed into something resembling a small city. Human engineers worked alongside Talani architects to design permanent housing. Draknari farmers shared agricultural techniques with human colonists. Vorthak technical specialists helped human doctors develop new medical treatments by combining organic and cybernetic approaches. It was a preview of what the galaxy might become under human leadership. Not an empire based on conquest and exploitation, but a civilization founded on cooperation and mutual respect. The Federation had ruled through fear for millennia. Humanity was offering something that many species had never experienced: hope for a better future. But Park knew the transformation wasn't complete. Deep in Federation territory, remnants of the old power structure were regrouping. Some species remained loyal to their former masters, either through fear or genuine belief in Federation superiority. And beyond the edges of known space, long-range sensors were detecting signs of something even larger and more dangerous than anything the galaxy had ever seen. The hidden fleet had emerged, but the real test of human leadership was just beginning. The scientific conference room aboard the UES Prometheus was unlike anything the assembled alien delegates had ever seen. Dr. Sarah Chen watched their reactions as they took in the impossible architecture around them. The ship itself was larger than most space stations, but that wasn't what shocked them most. It was the casual display of technology that made their most advanced systems look like primitive tools. Walls that seemed to be made of flowing energy displayed real-time data from across the galaxy. Computing systems that appeared to think and respond like living beings managed millions of calculations simultaneously. Most disturbing of all, the humans acted as if this level of technology was perfectly normal. Ambassador Thex of the Draknari Empire struggled to maintain his composure as he stared at a holographic star map that showed the positions of every ship in the galaxy, updated in real time. "This is impossible," he muttered. "No species has this level of sensor technology." Chen smiled politely. "Actually, Ambassador, this isn't even our most advanced sensor system. This is just what we use for routine fleet coordination." The truth was even more incredible than the aliens suspected. While they had spent millennia conquering and controlling each other, humanity had focused on a completely different approach to civilization. Every challenge had been met with innovation rather than violence. Every problem had been solved through science rather than force. The difference in mindset had produced dramatically different results. Where other species had developed weapons to destroy their enemies, humans had developed technology to make war obsolete. Where others had built empires through conquest, humans had created systems that made cooperation more profitable than conflict. Fleet Admiral Corvin of the Vorthak Collective leaned forward to examine a display showing human manufacturing capabilities. The numbers made no sense according to everything his species knew about industrial production. "Dr. Chen, these output figures suggest you can construct a capital ship in less than 6 standard days. Our most efficient shipyards require 6 months for similar vessels." "That's because you're still using traditional manufacturing methods," Chen replied. "We developed molecular assembly systems about a century ago. Instead of building ships piece by piece, we program matter to organize itself into the desired configuration." She gestured to another display showing human research facilities. The scope was breathtaking. Laboratories on hundreds of worlds, research stations in deep space, experimental facilities that pushed the boundaries of known physics. Most importantly, all of it connected by communication networks that allowed instant collaboration across thousands of light years. Your species has had interstellar travel for over 5,000 years, Chen continued. In that time, you grew comfortable with your technological advantages. You stopped pushing the boundaries because you didn't need to improve. You could simply take what you wanted from weaker civilizations. The alien delegates shifted uncomfortably as the implications became clear. They had become parasites, feeding off the innovations of conquered species rather than developing their own capabilities. Humanity had taken the opposite approach, treating every challenge as an opportunity for growth. We've had interstellar capability for less than 400 years, Chen explained. Every single one of those years, we assumed we would eventually encounter species more advanced than ourselves. We never stopped preparing, never stopped innovating, never stopped pushing forward. Admiral Corvin activated his personal data recorder, trying to capture as much information as possible. What about your quantum computing systems? Our intelligence indicated that humanity had only basic computational capabilities. Chen laughed softly. Admiral, the basic quantum computers we shared with the Federation were actually our training models from about 50 years ago. Our current systems can simulate the behavior of entire star systems, model complex social interactions across galactic populations, and predict the outcomes of military campaigns with 97% accuracy. The room fell silent as the delegates absorbed this information. They had been outmaneuvered not just militarily, but intellectually. Human strategic planning wasn't based on luck or intuition, but on computational models that could predict their enemies' actions with scientific precision. A smaller delegate from the Talani Republic spoke up nervously. Dr. Chen, what about your weapons technology? How were you able to disable Vorthak AI systems so completely? Electromagnetic pulse weapons aren't particularly complex, Chen replied. The challenge was developing delivery systems that could affect targets across interstellar distances. We solved that problem by treating the electromagnetic spectrum as a manipulable medium rather than just a communication tool. She activated another display showing human energy manipulation capabilities. The demonstrations were carefully chosen to be impressive without revealing critical military secrets. Focused energy beams that could reshape matter at the molecular level, field generators that could create artificial gravity or manipulate time dilation effects, power sources that tapped directly into zero-point energy fields. But perhaps most impressive was the integration of all these systems. Where Federation technology was a collection of separate innovations bolted together, human technology was designed as unified systems where each component enhanced the others. Ships that could repair themselves, weapons that could adapt to any defense, computers that could learn and evolve in real time. The key difference, Chen explained, is that you develop technology to solve immediate problems. We developed technology to solve problems we hadn't encountered yet. This philosophical difference had produced practical results that were impossible to ignore. Human medical systems could repair injuries that other species considered fatal. Human environmental controls could make any world habitable within months. Human transportation networks could move massive populations across interstellar distances as easily as others moved cargo between cities. Ambassador Thex finally asked, the question that all of them were thinking. Dr. Chen, what do you want from us? With this level of technological superiority, you could simply destroy or enslave every species in the galaxy. Chen's expression grew serious. Ambassador, that's exactly why we developed this technology. Not to destroy or enslave, but to make it clear that such actions are unnecessary. We want what we've always wanted, to be left alone to develop our civilization according to our own values. She paused, looking at each delegate in turn. The difference is that now you understand the costs of interfering with that goal. The meeting continued for several more hours, but the essential point had been made. Humanity hadn't just revealed superior military force. They had demonstrated a level of technological advancement that made traditional concepts of conquest and resistance obsolete. They had moved beyond the need to fight for resources or territory. because they could create whatever they needed from basic matter and energy. Most importantly, they had shown that their strength came from cooperation and innovation rather than exploitation and control. Other species had built their power by taking from the weak. Humans had built their power by making everyone stronger. The galaxy was about to learn whether its ancient civilizations could adapt to this new reality, or whether they would be swept aside by a species that had turned the pursuit of knowledge into the ultimate weapon. The memorial garden on Luna overlooked Earth in a way that still took President Maria Santos's breath away, even after 6 months in office at humanity's new galactic capital. The blue marble that had been humanity's entire universe for millennia now served as the symbolic heart of something much larger, a galactic civilization based on cooperation rather than conquest. Santos walked among the flowering trees that had been planted to honor every species that had died under Federation oppression. Drachnary memorial stones stood beside Talani, flowering vines and Vorthak crystalline formations. It was a gesture that would have been impossible under the old order, where the strong simply erased the weak from history. Her aide approached with the daily briefings, but Santos knew most of the news already. The transformation had been faster and more complete than even humanity's most optimistic planners had predicted. The Altarian Republic had become the first full alliance partner, offering complete technological sharing in exchange for protection. Within weeks, 17 other worlds had requested similar arrangements. Madam President, her aide reported, the Centauri Mining Consortium has agreed to human arbitration for their territorial disputes. They're saying our methods are far more equitable than the old Federation tribunals. Santos nodded. This was the pattern throughout human space. Species that had fought each other for centuries were discovering that human mediation could solve problems that had seemed impossible under the Federation system. Rather than ruling through fear and favoritism, human administrators applied consistent principles based on fairness and mutual benefit. The economic results had been even more dramatic than the political ones. Trade routes that had been controlled by corrupt cartels were now open to all species on equal terms. Worlds that had been strip-mined by Drachnari corporations were receiving human assistance to restore their environments. Technologies that had been hoarded by the Federation elite were being shared freely with any species willing to use them responsibly. Most surprisingly, many of the former Federation military officers had requested positions in the new human-led alliance. Not because they had to, but because they genuinely believed in what humanity was building. Fleet Admiral Corvin of the Vorthak had become one of humanity's most effective diplomatic representatives, using his knowledge of Federation politics to help smooth the transition for struggling worlds. Santos entered her office to find Admiral Torres waiting with a priority report. The expression on her face suggested news that was both important and concerning. "What is it, Carmen?" Santos asked. "Long-range scouts have detected massive alien presence beyond the galactic rim," Torres replied. "Something far larger than anything we've encountered before. The energy signatures suggest a civilization that makes the old Federation look like a collection of primitive tribes." Santos felt the familiar chill that came with facing the unknown. This was the scenario humanity had always feared, that their preparations would prove inadequate against truly superior opponents. But she also felt something else. Confidence built on 4 centuries of successful adaptation. "How large are we talking about?" Santos asked. "Conservative estimates suggest at least 1 million capital ships, plus support infrastructure that spans multiple star systems. Their technology appears to be centuries ahead of anything in Federation records." Torres activated a holographic display, showing the sensor readings from the edge of known space. The scale was breathtaking. Not just individual ships, but entire artificial worlds moving through the void. Construction projects that dwarfed anything humanity had ever attempted. Energy manipulation on a scale that suggested complete mastery over fundamental forces. "What about their intentions?" Santos asked. "Unknown. They haven't attempted any communication, but they're definitely moving in our direction. Based on their current trajectory, they'll reach the outer edges of our territory within 2 years." Santos walked to her window, looking out at Earth and thinking about humanity's journey to this point. 4 centuries ago, they had been a single species on a single world, dreaming about the stars. 3 centuries ago, they had achieved interstellar travel and discovered they were not alone. 2 centuries ago, they had made the decision to hide their true capabilities while they learned about galactic civilization. Now, they faced the ultimate test of that strategy. Carmen, I want you to begin preparations for deep space reconnaissance. We need to know everything about these newcomers before they arrive. But I also want you to prepare for the possibility that we might need to evacuate significant populations from the outer worlds. Torres nodded. Already in progress, Madam President. But there's something else you should know. The former Federation species have been monitoring our communications. They know about the threat too, and they're requesting permission to contribute to the defense effort. This was unexpected. Santos had assumed that when faced with a superior enemy, the galaxy's older civilizations would revert to their traditional pattern of abandoning weaker allies to save themselves. Instead, they were voluntarily offering to fight alongside humanity. What kind of contributions are they offering? Santos asked. Everything. The Draknari want to provide ground troops. The Vorthak are offering to integrate their remaining AI systems with our computer networks. The smaller species are contributing resources, intelligence, and support services. For the first time in galactic history, we're looking at a truly united response to an external threat. Santos smiled despite the gravity of the situation. This was what humanity had been building toward, not just military superiority, but a civilization worth defending. They had proven that cooperation could be more powerful than conquest, that strength came from lifting others up rather than tearing them down. Over the following weeks, the galaxy transformed once again. Species that had been enemies for millennia worked together on joint defense projects. Human engineers shared their most advanced technologies with former Federation scientists. Ancient rivalries were set aside in favor of collaborative research and development. The preparations were unprecedented in scope. Every world in human space became a fortress, but also a sanctuary for refugees from areas that might be overrun. Every ship became part of an integrated defense network that could respond to threats across thousands of light years in real time. Every citizen, human and alien alike, became part of a civilization determined to prove that intelligence and cooperation could triumph over any force. As Santos reviewed the daily reports, she realized that humanity had achieved something remarkable. They hadn't just revealed their hidden fleet or demonstrated their technological superiority. They had created a galactic civilization that was genuinely worth defending, one that other species were willing to fight and die for. The unknown enemy, approaching from beyond the rim, would find not a collection of weak and divided worlds, but a united galaxy led by a species that had turned preparation and cooperation into weapons of ultimate power. Whatever came next, humanity and their allies would face it together.